I am, so I how much do I wanna reveal? Uh, so I am writing a book at a very high level, at a very, like, 10,000-foot level. It's about a cleaning lady, that is cleaning houses of top, um, police and gang members and gang, like, mafia, and she's basically going after drug trafficking and human trafficking. And because she's a cleaning lady, she has access to very personal information and stuff from all these top level people. Um, and definitely I am leveraging ChatGPT and AI to help me in this regard because I did a lot of work in the research. So I interviewed again, I don't know how much I want to reveal because of personal information, but I interviewed someone uh where I got a lot of information and I put it down, and I also kind of put down in general where I want things to go with it. And then I had ChatGPT write the first chapter, and I was impressed. And then I had to write a second chapter off of it, but not just general. I gave it like specific um, guidance. Like in this next chapter, I want you to like do this, and I wanted to end with this cliffhanger. And then I kept on going, and I did this for like about 7 chapters. So it's kind of weird how the book is like this blend, which is quite appropriate for ACO. There's nothing AI. There's nothing astrophysics. It's purely about drug trafficking, human trafficking, and it comes from a place of being a pharmacist and seeing what happens with narcotics, and then also having a startup in the medical cannabis space and seeing how devastating it is to have cannabis be in the black market. Um, and then also human trafficking, having interviewed a human trafficking survivor recently. So I think that might have stimulated me, although I'm not sure if that was after or before. But yeah, so that's what the next book is about, and it's called Ball Breaker.
Mm, quite the title, man. Quite the title.
Yeah. So I put some effort into it a few months ago, and I put it on pause just because of life. But I think I want to get back into it. What are your thoughts? I know you're interviewing me, but what are your thoughts about what I said in terms of the usage of ChatGPT? And ethically speaking, I would definitely write that this book was used with the help of AI slash ChatGPT. So thank you, Sam Altman. But is that enough for a lot of readers to like read something that's like heavily AI'd, you know?
Yeah, no, as you were speaking, I actually had a conversation recently with someone about this very topic because we're in a new era. We have not experienced this before where we're using ChatGPT for everything, including writing. And obviously the first thing that comes up is the ownership of the book, who has the copyright to it. And if you have a license, and I have to look at the licensing agreement for ChatGPT of once you prompt it to write it, I assume that ChatGPT grants you the rights to that work product,
Oh,
right?
it's just if you pay them,
Right. If
it's
you
like a
pay them.
transaction,
Because I
right?
do understand that with AI image generators, it's already been settled that if you have a license and you create an image, you have complete copyright ownership. You could use it for profit. Um, what's different though, or what could be a challenge, is kind of how we maybe see ghostwriters,
Right.
which is
It's almost like, yeah, in a lack of respect kind of way. It's almost like not ethical. It's like it's almost like you don't respect it as much.
right. So I think there's a societal tendency to judge books that were written by a ghostwriter. And
Which makes sense because you can't then compliment the book and be like, "Wow, I love the writing style of this, uh, like Donald Trump," you know? He had a ghostwriter, so it was not his writing style and art of the deal. So there's a lot of things that you can't compliment, like of Aiko, it'd be hard for you to compliment or even criticize or even talk on, like, the formatting, even the flow, any of the writing, because the only thing that came from the person is the essence, right?
Yes. And it's interesting. So I just recently watched a video about this very topic, and I think it kind of relates to ChatGPT because in the sense of how do we think of ghostwriters? Because I think as a society we've come to accept that ghostwriters we are generally okay with when the book is written by a celebrity and the focus of the book is their own life. So what we really care about is just getting the meat of the story. We just want to know what happened in the person's life. So we understand, of course, these people are not writers. They needed someone to bring their story to life. What we're buying is their story rather than the words, the character development, because it's all nonfiction.
Right.
But when a celebrity decides to write a fictional book and they're using a ghostwriter, that's a completely different story because it's like, well, you should have been just done this yourself. You weren't trying to convey the truth. You should have. There's a book written by Millie Bobby Brown. I don't know if you heard. I
No.
found this out recently. So Millie Bobby Brown, who plays Eleven in Stranger Things, just wrote a book. It's a fiction book, and she came up with the idea, but she had a ghostwriter bring it to life, which is, I guess, how
It's fiction?
it's fiction. Yeah, it's based on an
Oh, what a
event.
sellout. What a sellout.
So the thing is, I guess brings it to your point, is that she's not hiding the fact that there's a ghostwriter. She's the most transparent about it. She has the ghostwriter name, right there written, and she
I
gives
mean,
credit.
that's fine, but it's like, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know why, but for some reason, it's like worse than using ChatGPT in my opinion. Because at the end of the day, ChatGPT is a tool that's like you can say is somehow related to like Grammarly and spell check and all that stuff because it does require a lot of hand holding. If you ask it to like write a book, it'll be horrible. John and Mary went there. But if you use a human, almost it's like that ghostwriter is almost like I don't want to say a slave because they're getting paid, obviously, and she's I'm sure getting paid pretty well. Then what did she do?
Um, you mean Millie?
Yeah.
Well, basically what you're doing with ChatGPT. So not just the
No, I
idea,
know, but it's
but
like,
the very active process of like, okay, this person wrote something. I'm gonna go in, edit it, give more ideas, give revisions. So basically, what it's essentially using a person as a ChatGPT prompt.
yeah, and that's almost weird to me. Like I get it in terms of like nonfiction, like you said, celebrities, or you're like a scientist slash you're just trying to convey a certain idea in the best possible way. That's like, okay, you hire a ghostwriter and they write it well. But fiction, there's the art to it, and like, I don't know. For some reason, I feel like a ghostwriter for fiction is even worse than, not even worse, is takes like no time to do what it has to do. It's a very like tool like behavior. Um, but I agree with you in terms of fiction versus nonfiction, 100%. Like, I agree with that.
Yeah, because I mean, at that point, of course, we don't really care about, I mean, we care about the writing quality, but what we really care about is getting the story. That's what's important. So we understand. like you said, it's like this person's using it because they want to share their message and what happened to them in the most succinct, well written way so that people can access it. But with fiction, what we're looking into is the writing itself, the character development, the way that a story is portrayed, the poetry in the words themselves, rather than the, the facts of what happened. Um, and I think that you're right when you were saying earlier about ChatGPT and how people won't be able to complement it. I think there'll be a lot of judgment. And so people will look at books that use, I suspect, ChatGPT differently because those authors would be more likely to be discredited by saying, we don't know how much of it was you and how much of it was ChatGPT. And which details did you add versus ChatGPT added? And this, the beauty of the words, can you really get credit for it? And I think that people will, yeah, even if it's legally functional, I think that societal criticism will be really heavy on these books.
Yeah, I agree that the criticism will be on both sides. So on the ghostwriter side, I'm thinking of people like Dali. So when you go see a Salvador Dali weird clock that's melting, or the couch thing that he has, and the other sculptures and paintings, you're like, wow, this is so beautiful. But then when you go to his museum in Spain, you find out there was dozens, if not hundreds, of workers that basically created all those things. And I was really not put off by that. Um, just because, first of all, you're like, without that, you're like, wow, this guy was so productive and created so much stuff. There's like a lot of writers that are very productive at writing a lot of books, and you're like, wow, it's like not only the quality but the quantity. But when you find out the guy's like just managing a team of like hundreds, a few hundred artists, they're doing that. You're like, okay, now the quantity is not that impressive. Then, in terms of the technical capability, then you're also like, well, I mean, it's one thing to create like an art form that's beautiful, but to create it 1,000 times, that's lacking the technical angle. Um, However, you don't have the same criticism for an artist like that is using technology like tools. I think that's what I don't like about the Bobby Brown thing, is that ghostwriting became her tool. Like,
Right.
you know, like that ghostwriter is her tool. Like, she's the writer, quote unquote, and she used a human as a tool. However, when you're using ChatGPT as a tool, okay, like there's nothing offensive about that. I think that's probably where it rubs me the wrong way. However, I'm a little biased because I'm doing this with that. But I think that's where it kind of bothers me with fiction using a ghostwriter, is the human becomes a tool. However, a fiction writer that uses Grammarly, spell check, a computer word processor, and now the next evolution of that, which is ChatGPT, which you can argue, yeah, it writes, okay, but it requires a lot of handholding. I think actually the people that respect really good AI writing the most are actually people that use ChatGPT a lot, because we know how bad it could be. We know how lazy ChatGPT can be, or how generic it could be, and it requires a lot of handholding to even create. There was one time where I wrote a wedding toast, and I'm not even kidding. I spent more time using ChatGPT if than I have had in the past writing toasts, like humanly.
Yeah, I remember that. You went through like so many drafts.
So many drafts,
Yeah.
because I had it like try to make jokes, and it was like terrible. I mean, the jokes in the end weren't the best, like um uh Larry David level jokes. But I had it go through so many revisions, so many changes. So even though it's not a tool, even though it's a tool, doesn't mean quality comes easy. And at the end of the day, you're trying to convey quality a good story and everything. So yeah, the ethics are interesting.
Well, to add to the ethics element, one could argue that with a ghostwriter, what you're doing is also giving a writer a job and they are getting credit for it. Most, the books that are ghost written, we know they're ghost written because there's acknowledgments to the original author. And so it's somebody who would never gotten a chance to get their work published and written. And now they're given this opportunity. So
No,
uh,
for
that,
sure.
yeah.
No, for sure. The writer that's ghostwriting for Millie Bobby Brown is definitely getting probably a career boost, unless it's J.K. Rowling. Like, they're definitely getting a career boost, huge career boost. It's good for them personally. Doesn't mean they're not being used as a tool. You could be working for a pharmaceutical company selling drugs that are killing people, and you could benefit personally a lot from selling it and make really good money and get off hands free, but you're still being used as a tool to do something. In this
Well,
case,
but
very
you're using
malicious.
like a very negative example. In this case, it's just a regular job, right? So like if someone hired me as a video editor and they produced the video, no one really knows that I mean, I could get credit for being the video editor for it. So it's like I was used as a tool to create this product, this end product. There's a face on camera that's not me, that's being
I
shown as
wouldn't compare the two
what?
because there's a different expectation. There's almost the opposite expectation. When you see a YouTuber that's very popular, most people that know YouTube would expect them to have their own video editor, especially if they're popular enough. When you read a book, especially a fiction book, you don't expect there to be a ghostwriter. So there's
Oh
a
yeah, for
complete
sure.
expectation. Um, what I meant with the pharmaceutical example is kind of like the worst possible, the most extreme example of you being used as a tool, um, where you're benefiting while still being used as a tool, obviously for something malicious. Maybe it's not a good example,
Right. No,
um,
I don't.
but I don't know. There's still something weird about it. It's like almost tool dehumanizing to that person because really, are they the writer? Like in some ways, it's very similar to the ChatGPT analogy. Yeah, I mean, listen, AI ethics is complicated, and also it's going to be subjective. Different people are going to feel about it different things. There's some people that are going to be very conservative about it and say there's no place for AI in writing whatsoever. Like you should not even have the tab open, the ChatGPT tab open if you're writing. There's other people that are like would be okay with like some of it being written, as like a or like to help with at least the research element or like the first draft. Like there's some people that are gonna be okay with like the first draft being written with ChatGPT, and then the writer comes in and does the editing work. And then there's other people that are gonna be like, I want to read a book that's like completely ChatGPT, and the person isn't almost doing anything, and they'd be like, wow, this was a good book. So I think there's gonna be a range of things, and that's the crazy thing about what's happening. It's like in some ways it's scary what's happening with ACO and ChatGPT, where it's like coming into fruition. Because there's like a time scale that I was thinking about with this book of like, okay, by 2060 we need to have like an AI that like takes over the world. So timeline wise, what do we need to happen by like 2030, 2040, 2050? What happens in Africa? What happens to the cities in America? What happens to the global economics? What happens to like currencies? How is that going to change? So I tried to think about the timeline, and ChatGPT in some way accelerated that timeline a lot. So what that means is the end of this book of A Corp could happen not by 2060, it could happen by like 2050 or 2040. So, yeah.
What's your take, I guess, on reading a book, right? Yeah, reading a book that's written by partially by ChatGPT. Do you see that there's a future in it? What's your feeling of, do you think you'd be critical? Do you think that you would be, which camp of people do you think you'd be in?
Well, I think just like Millie Bobby Brown's giving credit to a ghostwriter, I think the writer should give credit and say it's partially AI. And I think the reason why is because it changes the game so much that you should give it credit the same way that you would give credit to all those other people. Like I gave credit to like friends, I gave credit to all these people. It's almost like you should give it credit because it was so helpful. And it was so crucial to the process. And yeah, I would read a book, especially if it's and I would be pissed off if I read a book and I liked it and then found out it was partially done with AI without being told. I would not be happy with that. Just because it seems like a skeevy move. And then yeah, if it's a good quality book, why not?
Yeah.
And I also think the human AI interplay is interesting. I think actually it's not like a decrease in value, it's just a difference in value. A book that's written just with human is like this, and a book that's written with an AI is like this, and it's just different. It's a different, almost like a different experience. Just like looking at AI pictures and AI other stuff. It's like apples and oranges in a way.
Yeah. What I think would be interesting, what
Mhm.
kind of book I would love to read that was written by AI, is one that is very clearly divided. So if the book had two perspectives, and one perspective was solely written by human, and the other one was written with primarily with AI, so that it is a book essentially split in two, but two personalities, two perspectives warring against each other. And I think I think there's a lot of creativity in using AI and ChatGPT. And I've seen this also happen in videos where, of course, there's so much criticism out there for using AI in videos, images, script writing, like text to speech. People hate that. But people have learned to use it in a very, very creative way where it's very clear when AI is being used and when there's a human element. And to have those two interplay with each other, that's in a clever, unique way. I think people like to see that, where it's not hidden, like you said. It's very obvious, but also it's also very clear when the human is present and when they're in control and they're just using AI to play with. Um, so
Yeah, I could see that. So you're reading a book and there's like two versions. It kind of reminds me of the books. I think it might have been Goosebumps, or I think it was Goosebumps, where there was like alternate endings.
yeah.
There's another way that you can use technology to do it. So like an ebook where you go chapter by chapter. So you read the first chapter and then it asks you for feedback. You give it feedback and then it writes the second chapter based on that feedback.
Yeah.
So therefore you have like a book that's written almost for you, and the writer in the beginning is kind of like sculpts this like dynamic interactive artwork. And the same thing could be done with a show, because if you make a show purely AI generated, you can watch a first episode, give your feedback, and then the show evolves with your feedback and like makes you surprised, matches your sense of humor. Because you could watch a first episode of a show and be like, yeah, the sense of humor was like kind of off, uh, you know, or I didn't like this character, whatever, and it could like literally adjust. Like,
So what's interesting is that what you're talking about here is fan fiction, which is why I think fan fiction is so prevalent. Is that that's what people do, is that they take the art that was created and say, I don't like this, let me make my own version, and they create their own fan fiction based on it.
oh, that's what fan fiction means?
I mean, yeah.
Oh, I didn't. Oh,
Have you
I've
ever read fan
heard
fiction?
I've heard the term fan fiction before, but I didn't know what it meant. For some reason, I thought it meant fiction that has like a lot of fans.
That's
But fan fiction is when fans write their own version of their fiction that they're a fan of.
yeah.
Oh, well, I hope there's a lot of I would welcome fan fiction of Aiko. If you want to write the second book, uh,
Oh, that's a fun
where
challenge.
John comes back.
Yeah, I mean, what you're basically the ending of this book, what you're setting up is the Matrix. When you think about it,
Well, it's kind of it's an unmatrix matrix. Uh,
right,
the only people that are in the matrix are John and his team.
right, yeah, yeah, yeah. So like, it's a microcosm of the Matrix, where they are in the Matrix.
Which I think is maybe why, in the end, why I ended it the way I did, because it's like a weird version of Matrix where, yes, AI is in control, but Aiko set up the system so well that he doesn't have to control, and it's almost like from this like uh processing minimization perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what I like about how you ended it is that I think it opens the door to a sequel. Like I think it you close a chapter and it concludes the story, but it also leaves room for continuation really well. And I think it's very good for a sequel. So I think it would work.
Which would be quite appropriate to use ChatGPT to help with that. Like I can easily copy and paste each chapter, have ChatGPT summarize it, put that together in like one document, and be like, "Hey, write the first chapter of a sequel to this book where John comes back."
Yeah.
Like, and literally, it'll just do that. Yeah, maybe I'll do that.
Um, okay, we should conclude, right? What time is it?
11:20.
11:10. All right, so right on time. Do you want to have your concluding?
Yeah. Well, I really enjoyed this, and I welcome, and as you welcome, other writers to come on, because we want this book club to definitely include writers of the book that we're reading. We're in talks with a publisher right now that's really exciting. So we encourage writers and publishers and to get involved with us, because definitely having the interplay between like a writer and a reader on the book gives it a much more interesting perspective. Um, and we have some writers that I think that are on schedule, but it'd be cool to get like a lot more. And some really cool writers, maybe Millie Bobby Brown. Although I'd rather interview the ghostwriter. Just kidding.
Well, it's also people have
Having
complained
them
about
both.
the
Imagine having them both on,
yeah,
right?
that would be an experience.
Yeah.
Well, Steve Malen,
Yes.
thank you so much for writing this book. Thank you for letting me interview you. This was a lot of fun. I mean it. And yeah, I hope we're gonna get a lot more authors soon.
Yep. I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I'm glad that it didn't give you a headache throughout the entire novel. So I appreciate it.
Only for a part of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you're serious, which part?
Um, I wish I didn't jot them. There were, it's not. It was just confusing. There were times there was just confusing, but there are
Uh,
also times because I know you and I know that you're referencing real life that I'm just like, oh, Steve.
got
um,
it.
so it's funny
Oh, Steven, a funny? Oh, Steven, like a face palm.
in a in a funny face palm.
Got it. All right. Got it. And the humor, do you think it was like good
It felt
or
very
fell
you.
flat?
What?
Or did the jokes, not jokes, but the humor fall flat sometimes?
I think I'm not the right person to ask because I know you and I could hear your voice through
Right,
this. And
right.
so I thought it was funny simply because I
Yeah,
know you're self-amused and that makes me amused. So it's
yes.
this loop that's created where I'm like, I'm amused because you
Yeah,
are
it's hard
amused.
it's hard to take away the personal side, which
Yeah.
is definitely why we need the writers that we don't know personally. So, Millie Bobby Brown and whoever your ghostwriter is, you're welcome anytime.